Similar to other videos, before we start doing the transformations with these tools, we're going to look at what we have. In this case, we have multiple Excel workbooks in the format of XLSX, and each of them have just one datasheet or one worksheet, and it's basically just monthly data. So we have the name of the month, then we have the name of the product that we sold in that month, and then basically it's like a matrix where we have all the territories on top as columns, and then the value for the sale within that month, within that specific territory for that specific product. So we have it for February, we have April, we have basically from January to June, and all of this files are stored in the same folder. So what we would like to do is basically just point our solution to that folder because we have some pending months. We still don't have information from July or August or any of those months. It's basically just to point to that folder, get the data from that folder, every single data, every single file, and then stack it all together. But of course, we do need to make sure that we transform this data in order to be easier to interpret or use it in a pivot table, for example. So let's go ahead and start doing the transformations inside these tools. I'm here in Tableau Prep, and I'm going to be clicking here where it says Connect to Data. Now, don't forget that all of the data that we have is stored in the same folder. It's all Microsoft Excel workbooks, but they're all stored in the same folder. Now, inside of Tableau, I don't have a connector to see all of the files in the folder. So I will have to select this that says Microsoft Excel. So I will click Microsoft Excel, go to that specific folder that has all of the data that I need. And I will have to manually select all of them and then click open so we can actually load it. So you're going to notice that, yeah, it's going to load each of them as you see here. And I'm going to show you what we need. So what we need here from this table is that we first need to add a pivot step, which is this one. So that's the pivot step. And from here, I will need to put the pivot values in this area and the pivot names over here. So where are the values of the pivot? What we're basically doing here is known in other tools as onPivot. So we're basically going to select the columns that should be rows. So those are the ones. And also Germany and all of these territories. They should be here. And notice what happens is, let's go ahead and do this. There we go. So it shows as pivot names. Those are actually the territories. You can just double click here to rename this territory. And then on pivot values, you can just put it as values if you want it. And that's going to be it. Now, there's something else that we need to do here. And that is that before doing that transformation, we probably should have done a fill down on the month column. So I'm going to show you why that is necessary. So as you can see on this right here, I'm going to insert a step. Just in the event that I actually did something beforehand, I can actually go back to the previous step or this flow and just click here to add something that should have happened beforehand. And that is this specific section. So in here, the month, it only has a header. So it's the month of June and should be filled down. Now there's a limitation with this version of Tableau. Right now there's a limitation. They don't have this functionality of working on a row by row basis this way, or on a row ID to be more specific. So there's no fill down as you have in other tools like Power BI or Power Query, and also in Trifacta Wrangler. So here, what you'll need to do is simply edit the value, and instead of being null, you'll have to manually replace it to be June. And you'll probably need to do the same with each of them. So that is something to take in consideration. It is currently limited by this. You cannot do a fill down. There are other operations that you're not allowed to do that work that way. So that is one of the limitations with Tableau prep currently. So again, I'm gonna be repeating this, and what I wish that I could do is that I wish that I could potentially just select this too, do a copy and paste, and actually apply that thing or those steps to other sources, to other data sets. In this case, really there's no way. There really isn't any way for you to simply do this right here, and there's simply no way. You cannot apply or reapply this same set of steps to other data sets, or other tables. So you need to do this from scratch, which is what I'm gonna do. So a step right here, I'm gonna display here null. Let's replace this with May. Again, this is not dynamic because it's me just replacing the null with a fixed value, but it's working for this case specifically. So let's go with step. We're going to be doing the same. Edit value April. I'm going to do the same. So let me just do this. I'm going to fast forward this until I'm actually done. Okay, so we have finally finished replicating the same transformations to each of the files. You could argue that we probably should have done the append operation or the union first, and then apply it based on the result of that operation. But in most cases, or in really specific cases, which is the vast majority to be honest, you'll need to apply this set of transformations prior to appending. And I found out through multiple years of doing this set of transformations with Power Query that it's better to do these transformations prior to appending the data. Because in some cases, again, a lot of cases, it happens that when you append it and you don't really clean it or you don't transform it, that you're not going to get the result that you expect. So this is what I found to be the recommended way of doing this. First, you transform it, and with the transformations, everything how it's supposed to look, you can later append it. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be clicking here. I'm going to do a union. And with this union, what's going to happen is that I'm going to click here where it says add. I'm going to add again. And this is all drag and drop. So just drag and drop it. And I think I'm missing this one. Yeah, add. There we go. So the result of each one is going to be added to this union. And you also get this table names. So you can actually see where it's actually coming from. So you see that field 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're all being stacked or appended or union joined together into this one. And after that, you can just put the output, and yeah, you can just run it and export it as a CSV, for example, to any location that you want, to the name that you actually want, or even publish as a data source. And this is how you'll do combine files, or how you'll combine multiple Excel workbooks from the same folder in Tableau Prep. Okay, now inside the Power BI desktop, we're going to click where it says Get Data. In Get Data, notice that we have Excel, so we can connect to an Excel workbook. But in this case, it will be better if we connect to a folder. And inside that folder, just get all of the files inside of that folder, since we want to combine it. So just click where it says Folder, and here you're going to get this parameter window, so you can enter the folder path or click Browse to find that specific folder. In my case, I'm just going to put here folder path, and this is the folder path where I have all of the files, as you can see, from January to June. And down here, we have the previous ones that we've seen before, which is load and edit, and also cancel. But we also see the combine button. So you can click right here where it says combine and edit. So we can go into the Power Query editor. And before that, we also get this window, which is called the combine files, which is basically just a wizard or assistant to tell Power Query how it needs to combine the data. So we can click here where it says sample file parameter, which is just the top view, is always going to get example file on first file. And what it's trying to do right now is that it's trying to grab one file and it's going to create what's called a function. So that function is a set of transformations that are going to be applied to each of the files inside of that folder before Power Query basically appends them or combines them. So we're going to go with now the Power Query editor, which is this one. And here, notice that it gives me this sales report on the left, but we also have this transform sample file. So from transform sample file, this is the query that defines how each file is going to be transformed. So here I can, for example, expand this column. We can do, you can simply get rid of all of the other columns and just do here. And yeah, so, or you can just get rid of this one as well. Just get the data and expand it. So expand it like this. So notice that the headers are actually on the first row. So we can click on this contextual button and use first row as headers. Now on month, we notice that we have January and all the values underneath that are null. What we would like to do is an operation called fill down. So just click on this column and then you're going to get this option called fill and fill down. Now, in some cases, we may have some files that have some territories that others don't. So instead of doing the pivot operation by selecting these columns might actually be variable, is something that we don't know the specific names of the columns that might actually appear. There might be more coming up in a future file. So instead of creating a script or creating a function or creating a query or creating a script or a flow that is based on variable data or variable parameters, we're simply going to do something on these two columns. We know that these two columns will always be here and they will never change. So we can simply right click on these two and use something that is called unpivot other columns. So you're going to be unpivoting every other column except those two, which is the amount and the name, which is extremely convenient. So from here, I can change this to be territory instead of attribute, and value, we can just leave it as value. So this is the function that is going to be applied to every single file inside of that specific folder before Power Query combines it. So the combination is going to be on this that is called sales report. And notice that you're going to get this expression.error, this error right here. You can just get rid of that by deleting that step. And notice what happens. Source name, we have the source name right here. And if we click on load more, we see that it has the data for every single file. So from January to June, if we add more files to that specific folder and we click here where it says refresh, then we will actually get even more data. So this is completely dynamic and this is completely different to what we saw before with Tableau. We're not fixing to only get a couple of files. We're basically telling Power Query to get all the files that you find in that folder, which is completely amazing and dynamic. So from here, all that we need to do is simply define the data types. So just define that this is a text, this is also a text, this is also a text, and this last one is a decimal number. You can literally just click here where it says close and apply, and that is gonna now load your data to a table inside of Power BI desktop, or if you were in Excel, it will probably be inside your data model or a new table for Excel. I'm going to be creating a new flow. Just click here, create flow. I'm going to name this appending data. So appending data, and it's going to be for YouTube. Just click create. And the first thing that we need to do with the flow is add datasets. So I previously imported some datasets. So those are tables from my Excel workbook. If you haven't imported anything, you can click on import datasets and go that route. So I just imported this 6. So just select them and click on add. There we go. So it's going to create 6 icons, one for each dataset or each table from the Excel workbook. There's no way to connect to a folder like we did with Power Query inside of Power BI Desktop. So that's something to take in consideration. Here you need to connect to that specific file. So now that we're connected to those 6 files that we extracted the data, let's go ahead and create a recipe. So I'm gonna use this one, January, just add new recipe. And in this new recipe, so it's going to create another icon with a script logo or icon, and then click here where it says edit recipe. So in this recipe, I'm going to do the transformation that I want to do on all of the files. So the first transformation that I want to do is fail down, which is basically the operation that we did with Power BI Desktop or Power Query, which is simply pick up the last record that we have or the last value and fill down or replace any empty spaces, or sorry, not empty spaces, but white values or empty values or null values with the previous record or the previous value in rows. So January, fill it down for any empty values that you find. So to do that here in Wrangler, you'll need to select the column, go where it says clean, go with missing, and use this option that says fill down with last available value. So fill down, go ahead, and now it creates this new column, which is exactly what we needed. We can just click here where it says add because that is exactly what we wanted. And now we can go ahead and do the unpivot. Before we do that, let's go ahead and rename this from name to be product name. So click add, there we go. And now I'm gonna do the unpivot. Now, similar to what we did with Tableau's prep, we're not gonna be able to select which ones we don't want to pivot. We need to explicitly tell Trifacta's Wrangler which columns we want to pivot. So I'm gonna choose, instead of the grid, I'm gonna select the columns view, and I'm gonna select from Australia all the way to United Kingdom. From here, I wanna say, hey, right click anywhere, and then restructure and click on pivot. Now with the unpivot, it's gonna give you this preview. So this is the source, this is the preview, and this is what it's doing on the right. Just click add, and that is exactly what we wanted. So it unpivot those columns. Let's rename this because this is not key. This is going to be territory. So territory for this one. And for the other one, which is value, it's going to be values with a capital B. There we go. So this is exactly what I wanted. Now I'm going to go back here. And what I would like to do is rename this. I'm gonna edit the name. It's not gonna be January. It's gonna be January transform. There we go. Just so we can actually keep it clear. And what I'm gonna do is that I could potentially just do the same that I did with the January dataset. That's gonna take a lot of time, especially how things are actually moving between windows here in Trifacta Wrangler. So that's not going to be a good experience. What you can do is that you can right click on this recipe, make a copy without inputs. So without inputs, it's just going to showcase like this. And I can, for example, select a data set and say, hey, do it with the June data set. There we go. Now, I highly recommend that you rename this to be something meaningful. So I'm going to rename this to be, instead of January, it's going to be June transform. And we keep on doing the same operation. So I'm going to do exactly the same, which is make a copy without input, and I'm gonna do it over and over again. So I'm gonna fast forward until I finish doing this copy paste. Okay, I finally finished replicating that same operation to each file. So it's gonna be doing that same transformation to each file that I have here. So 6 files or 6 data sets in this case. And what I would like to do is simply pick one of them. It can be any. So this one, for example, and I'm gonna be adding a new recipe. So add new recipe, and this new recipe or this new flow, or you can call it recipe, or simply a connection, or this step right here is gonna be the one that does the whole union between everything. So I can change the input. It will be amazing if you can actually choose from here, like, hey, give me this one, and this one. I want to combine everything, but it doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but there's no option for that. You will need to go to edit recipe, and within that recipe, you will actually go through the UI to do this. In this case, if I wanted to do something specific with basically the restructure of everything, or doing the aggregation as a new column, it doesn't give me the option here. Again, as you can see, there's nothing that gives me like, hey, I wanna add new data on top of the next. It doesn't actually work that way. What you will need to do with this is that you'll need to go through this step, add that step. So adding this step is just clicking that plus sign, add new step, click here and use union. So union is the function that adds additional rows from other datasets. And once you actually type that, then it's gonna give you this whole window to do that. So from here, add datasets, click here, and now you can go with March transform. You can go with May, February, April, June. January is the one that we already have here. So add datasets and align by name. It can also be aligned by the order of the columns. So the first column of the dataset with the first column of the other datasets, and so forth. So that's something else that we can also do. So in here is going to be January with March, May, February, April, and June. So all the 6, add the recipe. I'm going to change this to be the grid, and it's actually applying the union, and it should actually have 10,000 rows, as we can see here. So that is the number that we're looking for. From here, I do see that we have some missing values. So let's see what those missing values are. And in this case, the missing values are because when it actually did the pivot, it did the pivot even when there were no values underneath those columns. So what we can do is that we can delete those rows that have missing values. Just click on add as the suggestions state, and we're actually done. We can now click on generate results and export this as to whatever format that we can actually choose from, CSV, JSON, or TDE. And this is how you do this operation of appending or combining or consolidating data using Trifacta's Wrangler.